The temperature outside was -23. I know that because I checked my phone the second I heard the notification from my Ring doorbell at 6:47 inches the morning. I wasn't even supposed to be awake yet. I'd worked a double shift the night before at the hospital and had only crawled into bed around 2. But something made me reach for my phone anyway, and when I opened the app and saw what was on my front porch in Barrie, Ontario, I stopped breathing for a full 3 seconds. My grandmother was standing there in her housecoat. Not a winter coat. Not even a sweater. Her housecoat, the pale blue one with the little white buttons she'd had for years, and her house slippers, and she was holding a plastic shopping bag in each hand. She was 81 years old, and she was standing on my porch in -23-degree weather, and behind her, pulling away from the curb with the headlights already off, was my uncle's car. I was out the door before I even put shoes on. I grabbed her hands first because I needed to know how cold they were. They were ice. Her lips had that grayish tinge I recognized from my work in the ER, and I got her inside immediately, sat her on the couch, wrapped her in the blanket from the back of the armchair, and turned the kettle on. She looked up at me with those eyes that have always made me feel like the most important person in any room, and she said, quietly, like she was embarrassed to be there, "I'm sorry to bother you, sweetheart. I didn't know where else to go." I had to turn away for a moment, so she wouldn't see my face. Her name is Dorothy, but everyone in the family has always called her Nan. She is the kind of woman who still sends birthday cards in the mail, who keeps a candy dish on her kitchen counter that she refills every week, who taught me how to make butter tarts from scratch when I was 7 years old. She worked as a bookkeeper for 31 years before she retired. She never asked anyone for anything in her entire life. My name is Claire. I'm 32. I'm a registered nurse. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house in Barrie, and I had no idea, until that morning, how bad things had actually gotten. I need to back up. My Nan has 2 children. My mother, who passed away from cancer 6 years ago, and my uncle, whose name I'll call Robert. Robert is 58. He lives in Newmarket with his wife and their adult son. After my mother died, Nan was alone in her house in Aurelia, and Robert stepped in, or at least that's how he presented it to the rest of the family. He said he was going to help her manage her finances, her appointments, her medications. He said he was going to make sure she was taken care of. He said this at my mother's funeral, actually, with tears in his eyes, and at the time, I thought it was one of the kindest things I had ever heard. That was 6 years ago. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, because Robert controlled every conversation about Nan's situation, was that the arrangement had shifted into something else entirely. Nan had signed paperwork, giving Robert power of attorney over her finances, and over the following years, Robert and his wife had very quietly helped themselves to her savings. Her GIC, that had matured, the money from the sale of her car when she stopped driving, her monthly OAS and CPP payments, which were deposited directly into an account that Robert had signing authority over. He gave her an allowance, she told me later, sitting on my couch with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. $60 a week. For everything. Groceries, toiletries, anything she needed. If she asked for more, he told her she was being irresponsible with money, and that he was protecting her from herself. She was a bookkeeper for 31 years. She managed corporate accounts, and her son was giving her $60 a week and telling her she couldn't be trusted with her own money. But I didn't know any of that yet when she was sitting on my couch at 6:47 inches the morning in her housecoat. What I knew was that she was cold, and she was scared, and she had arrived on my doorstep in winter without a coat. So I made the tea, and I sat beside her, and I asked her gently what had happened. She told me that Robert and his wife had decided, about 2 weeks prior, that she needed more care than they could provide. She had a few small health issues, nothing severe, manageable things that any person her age might have, but they had used this as the reason to move her into a long-term care facility. She had not wanted to go. She had told Robert she didn't want to go, that she was perfectly capable of living in her own home, that she just needed a little help here and there. He told her it was already decided. He told her the house was already listed. She didn't know the house had been listed. He had listed her house, the house she had lived in for 34 years, without telling her. I put my tea down very carefully, because my hands were shaking. She had been moved into a facility in Newmarket 3 weeks earlier. She said it wasn't a bad place, the staff were kind, but it was very small, and she didn't know anyone, and she had almost no personal belongings because Robert had told her there was no room for most of her things. She had asked to come stay with me for a visit. Robert had said no at first, then apparently changed his mind, because at 6:30 that morning his son had shown up, loaded her 2 bags of belongings into the car, driven her to Barry, and left her on my porch without knocking. Without calling me. Without making sure anyone was home. In -23 degrees. She hadn't even known the visit was happening until his son knocked on her door at the facility and said, "Get your stuff, Gran. We're taking you to Claire's." I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked her, very calmly, about her finances. She looked at her tea. And she told me everything. The GIC had been worth just over $90,000 when it matured 2 years ago. It was gone. The proceeds from selling her furniture and some of her belongings when she moved into the facility, another $11,000. Her OAS and CPP added up to roughly $1,900 a month, and Robert had been collecting that for years. She wasn't sure exactly how long. She had no idea how much was left in any account, because she had not been given bank statements. She had not been given anything. She had a passbook from 2019 that showed a balance of over $112,000, and when she'd asked Robert about it recently, he told her not to worry about it, that he was managing everything, that she should be grateful he was doing this for her. I went to my room and I called in to work. I said I had a family emergency, because I did. The first call I made after that was not to Robert. The first call I made was to a lawyer. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. My instinct was to call Robert and demand answers. To call him every name I could think of. To let him hear exactly what I thought of him. But I had enough presence of mind, maybe from years of working in emergency medicine where you have to think clearly when everything around you is chaos, to know that if I called him first, I would tip him off, and he would move money, delete records, cover tracks. So instead, I called a lawyer who specializes in elder law. I found her name through the Law Society of Ontario's referral service, which is free, and I reached her office when they opened at 9. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Don't let your grandmother go back there. Don't send her back to the facility, and don't let Robert know where she is yet. Bring her in to see me this week." I wrote down everything she said. Then I made a second call. This one was to the Ontario Seniors Care at Home line, and then to the local office of the public guardian and trustee, because the lawyer had mentioned them as a resource. I documented both calls in a notebook I keep by my phone. Time, name of person I spoke to, what was discussed. I do this automatically now. I kept that notebook updated every single day from that point forward. Robert called at 11:15 that morning. He did not ask how Nan had gotten inside. He did not ask whether she was warm. He said, "I hear you've got Mum there," and I said yes. And he said, "Good, it's actually good timing. We need to talk about next steps for her placement." As if she were a piece of furniture being moved between storage units. I said I thought that sounded like a good idea, and I kept my voice level, and I told him I'd be in touch soon. I ended the call, and wrote the time, and everything he'd said in my notebook. He texted 3 more times that day. Each one a little more impatient. I responded briefly, and said Nan was resting, and I would be in contact soon. I did not tell him about the lawyer. I did not tell him what Nan had shared with me. I did not tell him anything. That evening, after Nan had slept for most of the afternoon, and woken up looking a little more like herself, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and I started building a file. I had her old passbook. I had screenshots of the Ring camera footage from that morning, time-stamped, showing the car pulling away before I'd even reached the door. I had the notes from both phone calls. I drafted a detailed written account of everything Nan had told me, and I read it back to her. And she confirmed every detail, and then she signed it. My neighbor, who is a retired teacher, witnessed it. I went to see the lawyer 2 days later with Nan beside me. She was sharp in that meeting. She remembered account numbers, dates, specific conversations with Robert. The lawyer listened to everything, and then explained what we were likely dealing with: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, possible breach of fiduciary duty under the power of attorney, and potentially fraud. She explained that in Ontario, the Substitute Decisions Act governs power of attorney, and that if Robert had been using his authority to benefit himself rather than my Nan, that was not just a civil matter. She also explained that we would need to formally apply to have the power of attorney revoked and to pursue either a new POA or, if Robert contested, guardianship through the court. She also said something that I wrote down word for word, because I think about it often. She said, "The money may or may not be recoverable, but your grandmother's legal autonomy absolutely is." We filed the application to revoke the power of attorney. Robert was served. I want to tell you what happened when he found out, because it wasn't what I expected. I expected anger. I expected him to call and yell. What he actually did was show up at my house. It was a Saturday morning, and I saw his car on my Ring camera before he even knocked. I didn't open the door right away. I let him knock. I checked that Nan was in the back bedroom with the door closed. Then I opened the door, and I stood in the doorway, and I did not invite him in. He looked different than I remembered. Smaller, somehow. He said he thought we could talk about this like family, that it had all been a misunderstanding, that he had been doing his best. I said, very quietly, that I had documented everything Nan had told me, that I had retained legal counsel, and that any further communication needed to go through my lawyer. He said that seemed extreme. I said that leaving an 81-year-old woman on a porch in -23 degrees without calling ahead was also extreme, and I closed the door. I stood in my hallway for a long moment. Then I texted my lawyer to let her know he had come to the house. The process was not fast. I want to be honest about that. These things take time. There were court dates, there were documents, there was a capacity assessment for Nan that was actually reassuring in its outcome, because it confirmed what we already knew. She was fully capable of making her own decisions, and had been for the entire time Robert had been controlling her finances. That assessment alone changed the nature of the case significantly. The Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee became involved. An investigator reviewed the financial records. What they found was that over a period of 5 years, Robert had transferred funds out of Nan's accounts on at least 47 separate occasions. Some were large amounts. Some were smaller, more easily overlooked. The total they were able to document and attribute to unauthorized withdrawals came to just over $104,000. This did not include the OAS and CPP income, which had been deposited into a joint account he had set up without her understanding the implications, and which was a separate matter still being reviewed. Robert's lawyer tried to argue that the transfers had been made for Nan's care and benefit. The records did not support this argument. The facility she'd been placed in cost $2,800 a month. Her OAS and CPP more than covered that. The other transfers had gone into accounts connected to Robert and his wife. A renovation on their house, a vehicle purchase, a vacation. Nan sat with me every evening during this period. We watched the news, we played cards, we made butter tarts. She cried once, just once, sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, and she said she felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. I told her that trust is not foolishness, that she had trusted her son because he was her son, and that the failure here was entirely his, not hers. She nodded and wiped her eyes, and then she asked if we had enough brown sugar for another batch. And that was the end of that conversation. The power of attorney was formally revoked. Nan was assessed, found fully capable, and a new legal structure was put in place with her explicit participation and consent. She chose me as her alternate decision-maker should she ever need one. But the emphasis from the lawyer, and from Nan herself, was that she was making her own decisions now. She always had been entitled to. No one had asked her. The financial matter moved into civil proceedings. Robert was ordered to repay the documented amount. Whether that process succeeds fully, I honestly don't know yet. These things take time, and the law is complicated. But the order exists. It's on record. What I can tell you is what else happened. The house in Aurelia had been listed but not yet sold when all of this began. The listing was pulled as part of the legal proceedings because the property was Nan's, and she had not given informed consent to the sale. She has since decided, after many long conversations and with full information, that she does not want to move back to Aurelia. The house will be sold, but on her timeline, by her choice, and the proceeds will go into an account that only she controls. She lives with me now, in the second bedroom that used to hold mostly boxes and a treadmill I never used. She has her candy dish on the counter in the kitchen. She has her photographs on the dresser. She found a community center nearby that does a weekly euchre night, and she has already made 2 friends there. Some people ask me whether I feel guilty about what happened to Robert. About the legal consequences, the financial liability, the way it has fractured what was left of the family. I've thought about this carefully, and my answer is no. Not because I don't believe in forgiveness or complexity, but because what he did was not a mistake made in a moment of weakness. It was a choice made repeatedly, over 5 years, against a woman who trusted him completely, a woman who had nothing left of her immediate family except him, and who had no idea that the son she loved was quietly taking everything she had worked for, and then, when he'd taken enough, leaving her on a porch in the dark, in the middle of a Canadian winter in her housecoat. She said sorry to bother me. She apologized for being left there. If I think about that too long, I can't stay in the same emotional register I need to stay in to keep moving forward. So, I think about the butter tarts instead. I think about the euchre nights. I think about the way she looked the morning she walked into her new bedroom and said, quietly, looking at the window, "I can see a bird feeder from here." Like that was the most wonderful thing in the world. I think about the fact that she knows, now, what is in her bank account, that she gets the statements in the mail, addressed to her, and she sits at the kitchen table and goes through every line with the reading glasses she keeps on a chain around her neck because she was a bookkeeper for 31 years, and she knows how to read a bank statement, and nobody will ever tell her again that she doesn't. There are things I would tell anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, because after everything that happened, people reached out to me, neighbors, colleagues, a woman I'd never met who found my contact through a mutual friend, all of them, with some version of the same story. A parent whose finances had been taken over by a sibling. A grandparent who had signed something without understanding it. An elderly person who had been told, over and over, that they couldn't manage their own affairs. Call a lawyer first, not the family member, a lawyer. The Law Society of Ontario Referral Service will connect you with a free 30-minute consultation. Use it. Document everything from the moment you suspect something is wrong. Dates, times, what was said, by whom. Get it written down. If your family member is capable of making decisions, which most elderly people are, the law is on their side, but you need to help them access it. Contact the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee if you believe financial abuse is occurring. They have investigators, and they take these cases seriously. And do not, under any circumstances, tip off the person you suspect before you have legal advice. I know it feels like the honest thing to do. It isn't. It's the thing that gives them time to hide what they've done. The morning it all started, when I ran out onto that porch without my shoes and grabbed my Nan's hands and felt how cold they were, I didn't know any of what was coming. I didn't know about the $104,000, or the 47 transfers, or the proceedings that would take up the next 14 months of my life. I just knew that she was cold, and she needed to come inside. Everything else followed from that. From just deciding that she was not going to stand out there 1 second longer than she already had. She is warm now. She is safe. She knows exactly what is in her bank account. And on Sunday mornings, we make butter tarts together. And she tells me the recipe like I haven't heard it 100 times. And I let her tell me every single time, because I would give anything to keep listening.